My name is William Kuskin, and welcome to Monday's Going the Distance faculty instructor seminar. Today, we have Jem Corcoran, who's going to be talking to us about engaging the virtual student. I'm tremendously excited about this discussion. I'll tell you why in 1 second. First, I want to say these are Monday 11:30 meetings. We've now had four of them already. This is our fifth, so time flies, and I think they have been just wonderful. We also partnered with Continuing Ed, and we do Wednesday and Thursday tutorials, and then Donna Hall does a fabulous Tech Friday, which is an in-depth exploration of a theme technology topic. Last week we did videos and embedded quizzes, and Donna gave a tremendous in-depth examination of how to do that. It was great. We're recording the lectures. They're archived on the Going the Distance website. I want to reflect for a second. It really snuck up on me that we've been at this for 5 weeks. This is our 5th week, and I think we have covered some tremendous ground. The point of these lectures is to provide a forum to talk about what lies in front of us and to bring up issues, but I think more broadly to think big thoughts about the changes that are upon us and about the way these changes are in fact liberating, about the way they bring up fundamental questions and ask us to dive into them. And Bob Erickson really started us off with this provocation: Socrates is dead, so we have to move on to a new mode of performance-based education. Chris Haynes followed that up by talking about how constraint defines teaching, whether it's the constraint of the lecture hall and the semester and the pattern, the cadence of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And he then doubled that over to talk about how constraint in the online world simply opens up new questions. Wendy Martin led us in a brilliant, poetic discussion of loneliness and the online student and teacher. Really an amazing discussion. And then Bob McLeod went last week with what started, or I guess the theme was moving into the lab, but in fact became a really large-scale discussion of what is our core mission. And Bob suggested that at heart, our core mission at a university is student success, which I thought was wonderful. So the Going the Distance discussion is large. It's framed broadly to think about teaching overall. And it's been a blast. I think it's going to continue that way. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jem Corcoran. I've just met Jem in our Group 5 planning committee, and I have to say, she has brought so much energy and vitality and brilliance to those committees that I've just really been impressed. Jem is a PhD from Colorado State University. She is an associate professor in applied mathematics, and she's a probabilist, works in the probability and statistic groups. Her particular research area, and I need to be careful here because just the words themselves, I'm out of my element. Her particular research area focuses on Markov chain and Monte Carlo algorithms, which, as I understand it, she works on simulations, particularly predicting how an object behaves in equilibrium. And this involves not just understanding the object's movement, but being able to predict the entire network's relational structure. That's as far as I can go with it, but I do know that early on, Jem shared with me a kind of montage of her online teaching, and it was like watching a movie. It was filled with such energy, such incredible, it sucked me in so that I felt like I wanted to ride through the entire semester in this course. And that to me expressed a kind of power that we can generate, that Jem can generate in teaching online. So I asked Jem if she would participate. She suggested the topic, engaging the virtual student. And I'm so delighted to hear what she has to share for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Jem. Thank you so much, Jem, for joining us. Thank you all. This is a great turnout. I'm going to shift my screen to speaker view. And Jem, with no further ado, thank you.
All right. So one of the things that still plagues me with these Zoom things is the timing it takes to share my screen. So let me just get that out of the way before I get started. Okay. There, yes. Okay, so thank you so much for that introduction and the invitation and the encouragement to speak here in the first place. I am completely humbled by the teaching talent in this series and in the group behind the series, because, well, I've been teaching for almost 3 decades. In 1 more year, it will be 3 decades. I have never once had any formal exposure to teaching pedagogy. Or even the word. I worked on pronouncing it all weekend. And I learned a lot of other things that when you Google pronounce this word, you get a lot of interesting other stuff. So maybe at the end, I'll go over with you the other words I learned. But I have been loving these Going the Distance seminars because I just think they've been great. And I'm really hoping and want to do my best to bring something to this series, which is what we all want to do when we walk into a room. And teach in person or teach online. We're not there to spew information. We're there to bring something to the people and to change them in some way. Maybe not a huge fundamental way, but to change them. So as William said, he asked me or approached me about the idea of doing this talk after he saw one of the videos that I made for my students. And we initially thought that I might talk about how to make engaging videos, but I scrapped that idea pretty soon after that because in favor of the idea of engaging students in general, because none of us have time for massive video editing. We really don't. So, so here's how I think about it. This is Zoom. And this is full video production. And I'm not even asking you to get halfway, just a little bit away from Zoom. And I think it will bring a lot to your classroom. So we went remote last semester. I can't even believe that was last semester anymore. It feels like last year. It feels like we've been in this pandemic for quite a while. But we went remote right before spring break. And so I spent my spring break working on videos that I had intended to use for the entire rest of the semester. But what happened was I slept 0 to 1 to 2 hours every single night of spring break. And I came away with 2 videos. I even showed it in my videos that this is a screen behind me that I was filming with, and it was nighttime when I started filming, and you can see the sun coming up there. And I firmly believe that if I took the screen down, you might even see a passing of seasons. That's the kind of rate it was going in. So we can't do this, but we can slowly do this and build a portfolio of online information that we can use even if we go back to a fully 100% in-person teaching environment in one of, well, I was going to say one of 2 ways, but many ways. So you can bring it along with you in class. You can have students watch it after class to help bolster things you've told them. You can have them watch it before class to use the kind of flipped classroom mode where you're bringing them information before they walk in and then you've got time to discuss it. But I'd like to talk about 2, maybe 3 things today, depending on how you bullet this. So number 1 is about being an engaging teacher, and from a very specific perspective. In class, we're usually thinking of engaging as maybe not synonymous, but closely tied to active learning and groups and partnering and, I don't know, scavenger hunts and ways of getting people engaged. And that is great, and I think we should be doing that, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about being engaging from a presentation point of view, so that you can still be engaging even in just a lecture series with minimal interaction. And then you add that other stuff and you have amazing, I think. And I think a lot of teaching is a performance art. Yeah, but I guess I just ran out of a thought on that. But the second thing, or third thing, or fifth thing, depending on how you're reading my horrible bullets, is upping your Zoom game. And this consists of two things. So first would be increasing engagement over Zoom, because that's a different set of skills than being engaging in person. So some things do transfer, but some things don't. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the differences there. And then a little bit about video editing light. I'd just like to encourage you to push away from uploading straight Zoom, but not be video editors. So I wasn't kidding when I said that I haven't studied or even thought about pedagogy, still can't say it, before, or that I haven't really thought that much about engagement or about what I'm doing in my classroom. So this past weekend, I spent a lot of time in self-reflection, trying to figure out what I do in the classroom and how I could talk about it and tell you about it and figure out what it is I'm doing. And I also spent a little time researching to back some of the things I want to talk about up with psychology. So stop sharing for a moment. So engagement is not a synonym for entertainment. And a lot of people from my readings this weekend, because I have not been studying this stuff, seem to think not only is engagement not a synonym for entertainment, and I agree, but that entertainment does not have a place in the classroom because it cheapens the learning experience. So I don't agree as long as you keep it reined in, and I want to talk a little bit about that today. I also don't think that being engaging in the classroom is necessarily a commitment to active learning. I truly believe that if you are doing a straight-on lecture style format of teaching, and you have those people in the class that never speak up, that never interact with you, those quiet people can still be fully engaged in the material in their way. So anyone who's been teaching for any length of time knows that you have good days and bad days, high energy days, low energy days, days of boundless inspiration, and the opposite. And your students come in with all of those levels of all those emotions and moods as well. And they are influenced by you, and you are influenced by them. And this becomes a little harder in an era of Zoom and remote teaching. If you have a class that's highly interactive, you're going to feed off them. Going back to the idea that teaching is a performance art, a lot of theater people would say the same thing. But if you are lecturing with minimal student participation, it is really up to you to bring it. And it's up to you to feel it. And I don't think you need me to tell you that your students will know if you're faking it. So this idea of you having to bring the engagement is even more critical now that students are going to have their cameras off, looking at you, and be muted. But no, I didn't mean to shame you into turning your camera on. But they have reasons for that. So bandwidth and privacy, and even if they have their cameras on, if you're teaching a large class, you're not going to see everyone anyway. So I'm just saying it's harder. And this is what I want to focus on right now. I don't want to talk about, again, projects or active learning, but the part of student engagement that comes purely from presentation. So, so what are you thinking about right now? You're probably thinking, I'm going to talk about energy, and that's certainly a part of it. And I'm going to talk about passion, and that's also a part of it. But this is not all of it. And that passion comes from either a passion for teaching or a passion for the material you're trying to convey, or when it's all done right, both. And remembering how it was when you first learned these things. Energy is a big part of it. I actually have an energy drink right here. My students know when I walk into the classroom with this red bottle, they are in for a ride because sometimes I overdo it. It is a sports drink. But energy is a big part of it. And I think you have to be really mindful of your cadence, your rate of speaking, and your inflection, and know that everyone drops off from time to time into that trombone-inspired Peanuts teacher going, wah, 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 wah. I do it, you know. Sometimes I'm off the walls, but sometimes I'm getting into that groove. And I have been known to stop talking suddenly, drop the chalk, and walk out of the room without saying a word. And I'll come back in a few seconds later through another door, if there happens to be 2 doors. And I come in with a big, let's try this again, shall we? And it's gimmicky, yes. You don't want to do that more than once a semester, but it's doing something important. It is breaking up monotony, which is the entire point of all of that active learning stuff and groups and projects. You know, it's just another way to break up monotony. And I found an interesting thing in that when I walk back into that room, in those moments where the students have a confused look on their face. Why did she just drop the chalk and run out of here? And I can see them realizing what I just did. And that refocuses them. And I feel like they're more engaged, and I feel like I'm more engaged, because in those seconds in the hallway, I am saying to myself, what are you doing? This is not right. You got to do better. So I'm pretty animated. Not here. Ironically, this is the least engaging talk I think I'll ever give in my life. And that's because I'm not comfortable with this material. I don't study teaching. A lot of my drive comes from my passion for math. I'm a math teacher, and seeing other people discover. So I really do think this is my least engaging talk I ever have given or will give. So I thank you for sticking it out this long. But in the classroom, I am very aware of my position in the room at all times. As a teacher of mathematics, I can't stray very far from the board. We're always writing formulas and stuff. People have a lot of misconceptions about math, and that it's all about, you know, formulas, and it's not. And I have equal misconceptions about the humanities, because I imagine all the professors over there standing on tables with their "oh captain, my captain" moments and prancing around the room. But I am being tied back down to, I gotta get near that board. So even if I'm kind of stuck and bound by a fixed countertop or table or podiums, I am very aware of taking steps forward and back as much as I can, and having a 3D presence in the room, even if I'm not walking around the room. I'm just always thinking about these kinds of things, and about big arm movements, you know, and engaging gestures. And especially on Zoom, a lot of that body language goes away. So I do think a lot about making sure my hands get in the frame, and about being close enough to the camera, and about changing it. So I have Zoom capabilities on my desktop, and I can move this around, and it's all a matter of, you know, breaking things up and breaking up monotony. I write my mathematics. I use a virtual chalkboard, and I'm very wary of slide presentations at all times. They can be really good, and they can be amazing and engaging depending on the content and thought you put into them. And in the classroom, if you are talking with slides, you are standing next to them, and you are gesturing, and you are making eye contact, and you are filling the room with your presence. But slides on Zoom, especially if you're up in the corner, like your face is up in the corner, I think it actually kind of floats away in that wah, 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 wah. And so I I really like to make an effort in Zoom in switching between my slides and a full face, like I'm doing right now. And that can be hard. It's juggling, and it's hard in Zoom because restarting the screen sharing can be slow. So I usually, although I didn't do it here, have 2 Zoom accounts logged in. And so one of them will have my presentation and one will have my face, and I will be switching the focus. And that makes it a lot easier, but it does take a little bit of coordination and getting used to. And when I do have slides on Zoom, I am still writing on them because I am almost always trying to push the narrative that mathematics is an organic and creative process. And I'm trying to inspire my students to feel that way as well, and to never go home with the idea that mathematics is about formulas. So watching a television show is often held up as a prime example of really passive, non-engaging, a really passive, non-engaging form of entertainment. But I think that even with a television show, or maybe a movie on TV, not a sitcom, that you can be sucked in, and you can even be left thinking about it later, right? And that is a really passive form of information. And so when either of those things happen, it's likely that the show writers or actors built up some sort of anticipation in the form of curiosity. I have to know what happens next. Or they managed to reach you and touch you in some way and on some personal level. And that second part is really important. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but we really need to make sure that those quiet students in our class know that we see them and know that we understand their struggles if they have struggles. And we all know that the simple act of learning people's names goes a long way. And I love Zoom for this because they all have their names right under them. So this is going to be a good semester. I won't screw up for the first 3 weeks. It's something I did last semester when we went remote was I checked in with my students. I had a fairly large class, about 72 people. So I didn't have time for one-on-ones, but I got them in small groups and we met for 5 or 10 minutes. And, I asked them things about how their other courses were going. I wasn't trying to quiz them on my course, just trying to make sure that I know them, I see them, I understand their struggles. So when I started the discussion about television and said it's one part curiosity and anticipation that might pull you in, and another part is maybe speaking to you because the show is on a topic that really hits home for you. I want to go back to the first part about curiosity and anticipation. I truly believe that there is no learning without emotion and emotional investment from both the students and from you. There are social emotions, but there are intellectual emotions, and they're not all good. I mean, I hope to draw out the right emotions, not the anger. Curiosity being one of them. And curiosity is itself not necessarily positive or negative. It depends on the situation. So let me go back to my screen sharing, which I'd hope to do more smoothly, but I don't have 2 Zooms set up today for reasons. Just give me a moment. Oh, and of course, it's not working now. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I heard on NPR radio a few months ago, I was listening to an interview they were giving that was being given by Professor Lombroso in the Department of Psychology at Princeton. And I went back and looked up some things that she's written so I can get some better quotes. And so she said that when our curiosity will not be satisfied anytime soon, we focus on not knowing. And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but this is kind of negative and frustration. We're focused on the information gap, and she says this is largely aversive. And when our curiosity is on the verge of being satisfied, we focus on the, quote, almost knowing or anticipated resolution. And this is a more positive experience. In the interview, she actually went as far as to say that studies have shown that keeping anticipation going to spur curiosity for a few minutes was strongly correlated with a positive experience, but making people wait 30 minutes, and I was shocked at how short of a time that is, was highly correlated with a negative experience. And the idea was this idea, saying that way too many times, that there is an information gap and frustration, the negative experience, and the anticipation and curiosity and desire to do more. So researchers, like many of us in the university, I can't figure out if, I think it's a chicken and an egg thing that I can't quite figure out. We are clearly not so negatively swayed by the information gap because we spend months and maybe years on problems at times. And so I said chicken and egg because I'm not sure if that's why we went into our fields or if that's something we learned in our fields. But in this NPR interview, I was really surprised by what a short period of time that corresponded to negative emotions. And so at first I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't give an overview of what I'm going to do in a lecture at the beginning, because that'll be frustrating if I don't get to it for 30 minutes. But I don't think that at all, because the lecture is building and filling little information gaps and making people feel realization in small levels, at least I believe. And the small levels and building thing, I think, will lend itself towards the idea that everyone's talking about these days for video lectures about chunking material and keeping short videos and short goals, and I guess not frustrating anyone. So while I was doing my minimal research this weekend, I'm not going to talk about this, but I came across this paper that I found fascinating. Curiosity and time from not knowing to almost knowing. And it did talk about this same idea of information gap, frustrating, anticipation, kind of inspiring. And I would highly recommend it. I read it yesterday, and I'm going to give it another read today. I found it to be really fascinating. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears here. Let's talk about videos for a bit, since that was the thing that got me kind of started on the idea of giving this talk today. So I want to show you a 51-second, maybe we won't watch the whole thing. I guess we will if it's engaging, but a 51-second video from a popular beauty YouTuber. I wanted to point out some commonalities in video presentations of successful video presenters. And I thought it would have been better to go live into YouTube right now and just pull up any video, but I was a little afraid of the bandwidth issue, so I did download a video, but I didn't put a lot of time into picking one out. So the big YouTubers are the people that frankly got lucky, got something viral in, and then honed their craft. Great cameras, great lighting, all of that sort of thing. So let's just watch this for, I don't know, 20 or 30 seconds. And I hope the bandwidth is good enough for you to see it. Hey guys, today I'm showing a very, very fun video. Okay, so I'm going to stop that because I am kind of rambling on. And So what I wanted to point out was that this video is pretty simple. The pretty simple background. There's no props. She does have impeccable lighting and a really good camera, I have to say that. But, well, she's enthusiastic and easy to listen to. And if I played it longer, you would see she's a little self-deprecating, which I always like to throw into my lectures. It makes me more relatable. And it's the truth that I have my own issues. And I'm not, you know, I like my students to see me as human. So that's not really what I wanted to point out here. And what I wanted to point out was that in the full 51 seconds, I don't know how far we got, I counted 14 cuts, splices in 51 seconds. And that means there's video editing going on. And it brings me back to the idea that we're over here just zooming, we're over here with video editing. And I think she's gonna try to convince me to do some editing, and I am. But let me say this. In those 90 plus hours I spent over spring break to produce 2 videos, I didn't do much editing. I did scripting, and I started again. Like, that's no good. And I started again, and I started again.
Wow.
But when I moved to a
I'm watching
more free-form conversation, almost a stream of consciousness narrative in my videos, and then went out and cut things to make it sound more fluid and reasonable and not crazy, I spent way less time than I did filming videos without scripts, without restarts. And so I would like to encourage you to think about this idea of cutting. There was one sentence in this video where she had 4 different pieces to the sentence. That's 3, should be a mathematician. 3 or 4 cuts in that sentence. And this stuff is not, no, sorry. This stuff is not that hard to do. I thought about talking about ways, you know, software, but I think that's going to be different for everyone. And this is kind of a typical look for a video editing software. And I always try to make an opening. So you saw it in my video that I played on when I started the talk, which was a countdown old-fashioned film reel. And in it is a stochastic process, a sequence of random variables counting down, you know, which brought it into the context of my class. So I have this always sitting here on this timeline, minimized on my screen. And when I'm done with a Zoom session, I just drag and drop it right here. And already I've done something to put a little polish on this. If you can go in and take out the cuts, you can remove your ums, and you can remove a lot of things. You can remove some student discussion if you think they're not open to being on there. And I like to put 30 seconds to 1 minute on the end of not a wrap up, but a stay tuned. I use a lot of television speak and stay tuned and same back channel, and I try to drum up anticipation for what I'm going to say next. Although given what I've read this weekend, maybe I'm frustrating my students. I don't know. But they usually come back, so I suppose it's okay. But this idea of making quick cuts, like pulling out that or that entire, if you've ever tried to film a video, you've probably stopped and gone, take 4. If you just keep going and cut those out, you'll save yourself a lot of time over restarting. And I think the cuts themselves add energy and a breakup of that, what's the word, monotony, and give a little bit of zzz, zzz. So even if you're not going full on production, I think it can add a lot. While I'm here talking about videos, I'm almost done, sorry, I'm rambling on. I wanted to say something quick about the format of your video. If you're getting frustrated, I would change the kind of files you're using. So if you download a file from Zoom, it is an MPEG-4 or MP4 video. And I found by changing those into videos with the MOV extension, cut down my time enormously. I went from 1 hour of uploading to YouTube time to 3 minutes for a 50-minute video. And I had less processing time in my video editing software. So think about those things. Different formats could really help you out and speed things up. Okay, so as I said earlier, I think even if we get back to 100% in-person teaching, you can use these videos on the front end for like a flipped classroom and motivating what you're going to talk about. And you can use them on the back end because students always need to hear things again. Let me move out here. But I tell stories in math. I treat teaching as storytelling in a way that's peeling back layers towards a goal. And so I think that's a way of building up anticipation, but it's also more interesting. A common line of attack to proving some things in math is proof by contradiction. So you say, I want to prove that A happens. You say, suppose that A did not happen. Well, then this happened and this happened. And I got sent into this horrible corner from whence there is no return. So A must have happened. I have brought this into the classroom by having students sort of be the different points and starting a debate, and even in videos talking to myself and being a little bit schizophrenic, and sometimes even being on the other side of the table. So I am having a discussion with myself and arguing my proof to myself and making it seem, it's not just seem, I believe that it's an organic process, and I want my students to know that and not think that we're just going through some set of rules and things to memorize. So yeah, it's a little schizophrenic, but I think that's engaging. So I just want to wrap up. Sorry, I'm going way over. If my students come away from one of my classes thinking that math is about formulas, then I did something very, very wrong. I always tell people, and it's the truth, that the reason I went into math was, that slide, the reason I went into math is because I have a horrible memory. And I feel, but this is maybe my misconception about other areas, I feel that if I'm taking a history exam and I don't know who did what in what year, that I'm pretty much screwed. But math I can come up with. It comes from the gut. It is problem solving. It is puzzles. It is engaging by its very nature. So I'm fortunate to be teaching a course like that or in a subject area like that. To finish off, I want to say that I said earlier that people say that engagement is what you're going for, not entertainment, and that entertainment cheapens the experience. I agree that engagement is primarily what you should be going for, but I am prone to theatrics. I did not plan this well for my screen share. Let us all be we're all being unengaged at the moment as I speak, the longer this takes. Okay, so I am kind of prone to theatrics and grandiose gestures and humor. Another interesting article I came across this weekend was this explanation of the relationship between instructor humor and student learning. And I thought it was very enlightening. I'm not an expert on it, so I'm not going to try to talk to you about this paper. But I think you can be both engaging and entertaining. And I think that entertaining can come across two ways. It can help the learning, and it could just be fun sometimes, which might be a reset or a refocus. You know, we're going into mwah-mwah territory. So I highly recommend this humor article, and I much less highly recommend bringing confetti cannons to class. This is one of my classes, and the reason I don't recommend it, and that's one of my orange energy drinks, I don't recommend it because people in neighboring classrooms tend to think there were shots fired. And so yes, now I'm admitting on video that's going into an archive that was me in the engineering building and the Fleming building and the engineering building again. So I'm not going to do this anymore. But this wasn't a confetti cannon just for the sake of confetti. We had just proved something that we'd been working towards for several weeks. And it was a great culmination. And everyone took home a piece of confetti and wrote part of the theorem on it. And it was just a lot of fun. So one of my goals for the upcoming semester is never having my students wonder why they didn't take a gap year, and never wondering why they couldn't just get the same content from 8 other sources online. Because it's not about content as much as it is about the engagement. And one of the best things a student can say to me at the end of the semester, and it really is a privilege to hear it, is that I never thought I would care about Markov processes or subject of the day, but, and it's especially great to hear the ones coming back later and saying, I changed my major. I became a, you know, I went into a whole different career than I ever thought I would do, based on being engaged. So thank you for listening. I think you should come by and see one of my math talks because they're better. But let us take a moment to appreciate that I didn't, and I'm doing it because I have no personal filter, bring up the really corny slide. I know, I so didn't want to do that, but there it is. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That was great. That was great. I took so many notes and I have so many questions, but before we get into that, let me turn it to our audience. We have a great audience. Who would like to start? Who has a question? Who wants to start us off with opening questions?
My name is Chris Kaler. I'm going next week, and you have just raised the bar, so thank you for stressing me out.
Thank you for that.
But I have a question. I think, by the way, I think we're kindred spirits, as William can attest, in terms of how I like to teach. But I learned a lot listening to you. But one question I have is, you are very theatric, as you said. How did you translate that from 90 hours of video, whatever you did over spring break, and then sustain it through the rest of the semester? Can you explain a little bit how you captured that or did that? It sounds like you did it live, or you, I don't know, if you could refresh my memory, because I was really interested in what you did.
Yeah, I did finally ask my students to join me for live Zoom to have feedback, and I didn't hold it at the time of the classes. So I had them join me to help me out and mostly to keep me from restarting. And so not engaged right now.
In a very real way, I have a similar question as Chris, which is, you spent spring break doing 2 videos, and I've been there, Jem. In fact, I am dreading, I have this MOOC hanging over my head now, and I can't finish scripting it. It's like a mental block because I'm dreading getting to the making of the videos for exactly the reason you said. It's going to take me forever to make the videos. So I really appreciate your sense. Don't script, edit. Get through the video and edit it. That's great. But how did your class end up looking? Was it mostly video, or how did you, in those last weeks of last semester following spring break, what did you do?
It was not mostly video because I just couldn't keep up with that pace. I tried making another video after spring break and it only took me 40 hours. I'm like, I'm on a roll, I'm doing better, but I cannot sustain this. So it was very much a live class with a virtual blackboard because I do think it's important to have activity of writing. And it was very much like my in-person classes. I did fortunately get a lot of interaction out of my students, and my office hours I thought were amazing because so many people, I mean, most of the time I have 5 out of 80 people coming to an office hour all semester, but everyone thought I could just drop in now and see what people are asking. I'll keep my camera off and I'll stay here and hang out in the background. And my office hours became extra lectures. And so in the end, my class was a lot like it was in the classroom, but I'm spending this summer working at it, and I hope to have more things for them ahead of time, videos on my Canvas page, videos to insert, but there's going to be a lot of live, and I think that's good. I mean, that's engaging.
Other questions?
Well, I've been reading some interesting things. There is a book which is called Death by Meeting. I don't know if any of you have seen that, but the author there, he compares meetings with writing a script for a movie. You know, a typical meeting goes 1 to 2 hours. A movie also goes about 2 hours. And in the movie, you usually stay engaged, or you know, sometimes maybe you walk out of the movie theater, but oftentimes you stay engaged. Whereas in the meeting, oftentimes you just start fiddling through your phone and do other things because it gets boring. So he more or less said that you in a movie, in the first 10 minutes is where you actually capture your audience, where more or less you say whether they, or you determine whether they are going to watch the movie till the end or not. So, you know, and he more or less argues that you have to do the same with meetings. And I'm sort of wondering here with, you know, the classroom, it's also such, you were calling it curiosity. He called it a conflict that you have to build up. And I'm wondering actually how that scales if you make one of those short videos. You know, the students come across a problem and they go and look, do I have a video which explains that particular thing? And we are usually recommended to make those videos maybe, you know, 5 minutes or at least keep them under 10 minutes. And so I'm wondering if in your experience that building up the curiosity or the drama, or however you want to call it, how that scales when you have shorter things than a typical 50-minute classroom or so.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure if I can answer it, but I will say that in the classroom, I have a lot of energy, but I do an unpeeling and storytelling, and I can't do that in videos. So I am relying more on energy and slick editing, and I usually have an after reel, almost a bloopers thing or something, and they all stick around. But it's yeah, it's a really tough question. Does anyone else have any ideas on it?
Well, I think that the term here has doubled over here. It's really interesting. It has me thinking because in your talk, the terms were basically anticipation versus fulfillment, right? The anticipation of knowledge or the ability to resolve, and then the resolution. The terms that Peter's using are conflict and fulfillment, right? But that folds into your notion, Jem, of storytelling quite well. And if we think, you know, what is the conflict we're setting up in this lesson, it does seem a pretty clear parallel to a narrative structure of, you know, problem, conflict, resolution. It's interesting because I actually hadn't thought about that way of storytelling working in the classroom so exactly, but of course it does. And then you can play with storytelling and give the resolution first and then the problem second as a way of changing up the dynamics from our postmodern, or at least high modern classroom.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I also think I don't ever want my lectures to become 100% video because it is a very different dynamic, and I need to be talking to them. Yeah. Other questions?
What thoughts?
This is Clayton. I've got a question. I was really caught by something you said just now. you were saying you can't do storytelling in a video. Can you unpack that a bit? What happens when you try?
Yeah, it's not entirely accurate, I guess, what I said, but it's certainly a very different experience. It's more like the classroom is more like a movie that's unfolding, and the videos are more like the car commercials that are trying to get you into this new
I'm
car.
delighted,
So
but I put the car away real fast because you never know when it's going
You
to
do tell.
hail, which makes
You
me really nervous.
you do tell stories in
All right,
videos,
so
but
put some money here.
it's a much more instant gratification kind of thing. It's a much
What are you doing today?
shorter horizon. Let me find who this is.
Hey, as nice as Caraway is, could we mute our mics? Thanks.
Yeah. I got that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a short story as opposed to a classroom is not a novel, but it's much more in depth, and a video is almost like a PSA or something. So I shouldn't have said you can't tell stories in video, but it's definitely different.
Thanks.
I have a question so you mentioned your office hours, so I have a question about office hours. When you have, more students attending, how do you just let everyone in at the same time? Like, just logistically, how does that work? And then how do you manage the time? Like, if you have 10 students and you have 1 hour, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I do have them all in at the same time. And I usually take a kind of quick poll at the beginning to figure out what the most, the questions that they have the most overlap, what they want to know. And I find that a lot of them sit there with their cameras off and just work. They get stuff done and they wait their turn, much like when they're in my office. So I try to, I try to figure out the questions that are going to help the most people, and then get into more individual stuff. But that's one of the things I think is that it's making my online office hours more successful, because they can sit there and do some work rather than standing in the door of your office waiting for you to be available. So pretty sure that's a big part of it.
Thank you.
So we're coming down to the end here. Other questions?
I talked about the, yeah. So hi, Jim, my name's Leland. Thanks so much for your talk. And I used to be a math teacher and I teach in the humanities. So I guess sometimes I'm standing on the, yeah, by all means, in a way, I want to reassure you, you've had some doubts about your presentation as you're making the presentation. And I think all of us who are here know and agree with you that, yeah, you try to be theatrical sometimes, you tell a story, basically you do whatever works. You figure, and you respond. And that's part of the problem with Zoom, is you don't have a strong enough connection with your audience to know, is this going over or not? So I think it helps to be, when you talked about dropping the chalk and leaving the room, I think you can do that kind of thing in Zoom. And I think it's really valuable because it helps remind them that they are not just little tiles on your screen, but they're actually, that you're tuning in. Of course, much easier for me. I haven't taught a class over, well, in the last 10 years, I haven't taught a class over 20, say 25. And so it's a very different circumstance. One thing I do actually is I stop in the middle of a lecture. I don't lecture so much given my course material, but occasionally I will say, whoa, I just said something really important or really beautiful or amazing. And you got to rearrange your faces. So I'm going to turn my face to the wall. And when I look back, you've got to look interested. And many of them looking interested kind of looks like having a heart attack or something. Yes, I don't know what. Does help. It helps remind them that that this narrative, there's something else. the narrative that you're trying to present as a teacher is also complemented by the narrative of their learning. And so that they have to be engaged in that activity, and you have to welcome, not have to, I don't mean like I'm giving the imperative, but one as a teacher, I think, has to be mindful of that. And that's a place to offer the encouragement, and then to ask the questions. What are you curious about? What do you want to know? What do you want to know between now and next class? I hope that they can stay interested longer than 35 minutes, because next class is, you know, days away from now. So anyway, though, I think there are so many ways in which what you're saying is connecting with each of us. And I think, and so thank you very much for bringing all those things up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Before I wrap up, Jem, is there any final words you wanted to drop on us?
No,
Not that you did. I mean, well, go ahead.
I think I said way too many words. So
I took three main points here that I thought were really fantastic and something for us all to think about. The first is, I think you introduced this notion of a tension between education and entertainment. And your resolution to that was the notion of performance arts and storytelling. And I really took from that a sense of education as an intellectual journey of conflict that has to find some kind of resolution to be satisfying. And that the more our students realize that they are on this journey, and that they are in many ways heroes with us of that journey, that it's their journey, but it's also ours together. And that notion of coming to some resolution to conflict is so important. It is the success of learning. So a second point I took from this talk was your point about scripting versus editing. And I tell you, I've fallen in the hole of over-scripting and over-rehearsing and becoming a perfectionist and essentially losing everything that makes my work good and bleaching it out. And what you reminded me, you said that math comes from the gut, that math is organic and creative. And those things are true for teaching, for all teaching. That's what Leland's pointing out, that really teaching has to have a sense of passionate spontaneity. And reducing that to a script, you might be able to make it as an actor or an actress pulling that off, but ultimately that's not what it's about. What it's about is capturing a lesson towards the fulfillment of that conflict. And I thought your reminder that editing over scripting or just letting it be, letting it do what it does, is so essential. Then the final point I came to was a lesson, Jem, that you gave us about candor and about revealing who you are. Not, yeah, you did it, but reminding us to reveal who we are as we teach. And that is so important, that if we don't want our students to be blank automatons, then we cannot be either. And if we don't want them to be simple tiles in a screen, then we can't hide behind that role as Herr Professor on the screen. So I just found that a really important object lesson that you've given us, that candor in ourselves as teachers and learners is ultimately what is engaging. So I want to thank you for your thoughts. And again, a tension between education and engagement that resolves in the notion of the performance of the educational story, the spontaneity in delivery that cannot be reduced even through 90 hours of work into a video. And then finally, the notion that teaching is about the self. It may be in part a performance, but it surely is about candor. So I thought that was fantastic. Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you all for joining us. And before I let you go, the group that Jem is involved in, affectionately known as Group 5, is working on a college-wide symposium that will take place on July 27th. Chris is very much involved with this. In fact, he's given us the structure to make it happen. Wendy is in it too. Sandra's there. So I invite you all, and I urge you to, there'll be further communication about this, but I urge you to hold afternoon of the 27th for an incredibly stimulating symposium entitled What's Your Plan? And it's going to get at how to plan for August. So with no further ado, I leave you to the rest of your day. Jem, once again, thank you for a great presentation. It's given us all a lot to think about. Onwards.
Thank you.
Thanks.